Gus and I glanced at each other, smiling. Once we'd crossed the street, he pulled out a seat for me and helped me scoot it back in. There were indeed 2 flutes of champagne at our white tablecloth table. The slight chill in the air was balanced magnificently by the sunshine. On one side of us, cyclists pedaled past, well-dressed men and women on their way home from work, improbably attractive blonde girls, riding side-saddle on the back of a friend's bike, tiny, helmetless kids bouncing around in plastic seats behind their parents, and on our other side, the canal water was choked with millions of the confetti seeds. Little boats were moored at the brick banks, half full of rainwater, some of them near sinking. A bit farther down the canal, I could see houseboats floating on pontoons, and in the middle of the canal, an open-air, flat-bottomed boat decked out with lawn chairs and a portable stereo idled toward us. Augustus took his flute of champagne and raised it. I took mine, even though I'd never had a drink aside from sips of my dad's beer. "Okay," he said. "Okay," I said, and with clinked glasses. I took a sip. The tiny bubbles melted in my mouth and journeyed northward into my brain. Sweet, crisp, delicious. "That is really good," I said. "I've never drunk champagne." A sturdy young waiter with wavy blonde hair appeared. He was maybe even taller than Augustus. "Do you know," he asked, in a delicious accent, "what Dom Perignon said after inventing champagne?" "No," I said. He called out to his fellow monks, "Come quickly, I am tasting the stars. Welcome to Amsterdam." Peter Van Houten's white row house was just around the corner from the hotel on the Wandelstraat, facing the park, number 158. Augustus took me by one arm and grabbed the oxygen cart with the other, and we walked up the 3 steps to the lacquered blue-black front door. My heart pounded. "The only member of his whole family who survived the war," Levi told us, referring to Anne's father, Otto. Her voice was hushed like we were in church. "But he didn't survive a war, not really," Augustus said. "He survived a genocide." "True," Levi said. "I do not know how you go on without your family. I do not know." As I read about each of the 7 who died, I thought of Otto Frank not being a father anymore, left with a diary instead of a wife and 2 daughters. At the end of the hallway, a huge book, bigger than a dictionary, contained the names of the 103,000 dead from the Netherlands in the Holocaust. Only 5,000 of the deported Dutch Jews, a wall label explained, had survived. 5,000 Otto Franks. The book was turned to the page with Anne Frank's name, but what got me about it was the fact that right beneath her name there were 4 Aaron Franks. 4. 4 Aaron Franks, without museums, without historical markers, without anyone to mourn them. I silently resolved to remember and pray for the 4 Aaron Franks as long as I was around. Maybe some people need to believe in a proper and omnipotent God to pray, but I don't. We squeezed into the tiny elevator together. Every surface, including the floor, was mirrored. We had to pull the door to shut ourselves in, and then the old thing creaked slowly up to the 2nd floor. I was tired and sweaty and worried that I generally looked and smelled gross. But even so, I kissed him in that elevator, and then he pulled away and pointed at the mirror and said, "Look, infinite hazels." The next morning, our last full day in Amsterdam, Mom and Augustus and I walked the half block from the hotel to the Vondelpark, where we found a cafe in the shadow of the Dutch National Film Museum. Over lattes, which the waiter explained to us the Dutch called long coffee, because it had more milk than coffee, we sat in the lacy shade of a huge chestnut tree and recounted for Mom our encounter with the great Peter Van Houten. We made the story funny. You have a choice in this world, I believe, about how to tell sad stories, and we made the funny choice. We arrived in my room, the Kierkegaard. I sat down on the bed expecting him to join me, but he hunkered down in the dusty paisley chair. That chair. How old was it? 50 years? I felt the ball in the base of my throat hardening as I watched him pull a cigarette from his pack and stick it between his lips. He leaned back and sighed. Just before you went into the ICU, I started to feel this ache in my hip. No, I said. Panic rolled in, pulled me under. He nodded. So I went in for a PET scan. He stopped. He yanked the cigarette out of his mouth and clenched his teeth. Much of my life had been devoted to trying not to cry in front of people who loved me, so I knew what Augustus was doing. You clench your teeth, you look up, you tell yourself that if they see you cry, it will hurt them, and you will be nothing but a sadness in their lives. And you must not become a mere sadness, so you will not cry, and you say all of this to yourself while looking up at the ceiling, and then you swallow even though your throat does not want to close, and you look at the person who loves you and smile. He flashed his crooked smile, then said, I lit up like a Christmas tree, Hazel Grace. The lining of my chest, my left hip, my liver, everywhere. Everywhere. That word hung in the air a while. We both knew what it meant.